So in this video, we're going to go over all different ways we can combine ranges in both Excel and Google Sheets. So we'll start with a couple of core functions that will help us combine our data. And then after that, we'll talk about a few other functions that will help us do some interesting things. So let's just start with our basics. So first of all, if I have two ranges, one here, I should be able to just combine them using something like VSTACK. So VSTACK is a function that allows you to pass comma-separated list of ranges and get a result. So for example, if I select this, comma, and then this, and then close parentheses, hit enter, you'll see what it returns is those two ranges combined together. And you can keep doing this for as many as you like. So if you add a comma here, it will keep adding more, right? So I can go ahead and select another range after this and so on after commas. Now for this example, I'm just gonna go with two ranges like this. So VStack is your vertical stack. So we're stacking two ranges on top of each other. Now we also have HStack. So HStack is going to stack your ranges horizontally. So H for horizontal, V for vertical. So basically the way it would look like if I, for example, have this, comma, and then this, what that should give me is that region followed by sales. Of course, I can then also do another HStack for this followed by this. And now that's another range. And then if I wanted to take this and put it on top of each other, then we could just put both of these inside of a VStack. So if I cut this out and go here, and I'm going to do VStack, and then as a first range, we'll have this HStack, and then I'll do a comma and I'll paste the other HStack here. And of course, we have to close parentheses for that VStack. And now if I hit enter, you'll see what we get is basically combined data from these two. But this way, we only choose certain columns instead of all columns from that data table, and it still works. And of course, if you wanted to do 3 columns, so let's say I want to add the states last column here, I can do a comma and add those two. And if I hit enter, you'll see now we get that combined data, and it gets us basically our results in the order we want them. So in Google Sheets, we can also combine our ranges using arrays, right? So the regular array method where we take this first bracket and we select this, and then we do, for example, semicolon and select this. And then if I close this and hit enter, you'll see it basically gives me that combined range like this. Now this wouldn't work in Excel though. This is just Google Sheets thing that works like this. But the difference between this and what I just did is if you use VStack and HStack, so let me actually do VStack again. So with VStack, you can actually select one range, comma, and then select another range that has a different size. So notice that in this, the first one I select has 4 columns, and the second one has 3 columns. And if I close parentheses and hit enter, I will not get an error. What it will do, it will basically just replace these with NAs. And then if you want to fill those with some default value, you can still do that by using something like if error. So I can do if error, open parentheses, and then go after this whole thing and do a comma. And let's say when there are no sales amounts, I want to just do a 0 for those. So if I do this, hit enter, you'll see it will basically take all of these, replace them with a 0. Now you'll see that it gives me these That's basically just formatting. So if you get these instead of your dates, that just means just go ahead and switch that to your date format and you should be fine, right? So that's pretty much all you need to worry about here. So that's our VSTACK HSTACK, and as you can see, we can also use if error to automatically fill any values that are NAs with something else using something like if error. And of course, you should be able to also use something like if NA. If you don't want to use if error, you should be able to use this too. Okay, so now that we know all this base stuff, how to use VSTACK, HSTACK, let's actually try to create something more dynamic. So what I mean by that, I'm going to get rid of all of this. And if I wanted to do VSTACK, and I wanted to just combine this and this other table, I might want to do this in a way that if I add more lines to this, those are automatically included in my results. So therefore, I have to select this extra lines. And then if I do a comma, I do this. I'm just trying to do this formula right next to each other so it's easier to see what's going on. Typically, you wouldn't put this VSTACK right below these. But if I just go ahead and do this and press enter, you'll see what it's going to do because we have blanks. It will basically have those blanks sitting here because I did select those extra lines, right? So those are now going to be included. And then, of course, there are also some empty lines here that we cannot see, but those are a part of this from here. So the question is how we can make this better so we don't have to deal with this empty stuff in the middle. And for this, what we can do, we can basically try to check if the whole line is empty, then let's not include the line. Now, the way I'm going to do this is by using a few functions like filter, and I'm going to use some lambda and BYROW. A lot of these are pretty complicated functions, so I'm not going to go too much in depth about how each one works, but I do have videos covering each one separately. But essentially what I want to do something like this. I want to be able to join this whole line together. So if I wanted to do that, one way to do this is to, for example, use something like text join. And as a delimiter, I would do nothing, double quotes, comma, ignore empty. I'm going to say false, comma, and then finally as text, if I just select this whole line like this, what that's going to do, it's going to basically combine this whole line of data to one cell. And then I could, of course, drag it down like this to get that for every line. And the logic behind this is that now in a separate column, we could check if this is not equal blank or if it equals blank. I'm going to do not equals blank. So if I drag this, now what would happen is that these lines get a true and these get a false. And basically false would be the lines we don't want to be included. Now finally, we can now take this and get our data using filter function. So with filter function, we can select this, comma, and then as a condition, as a matter of fact, instead of selecting the whole thing, let's go ahead and select this much without this part, and then comma, and then finally I'll do this, which is the range of trues and falses. So if I do this, you'll see that what it's going to do, it's just going to keep the ones that are true, and it's going to exclude all these blank lines. Now, this should probably not go this far. It should go until here. But other than that, that's going to be our logic of getting here. Now, of course, you can do one formula here, and then do another formula here, and then do another formula here, and then do this formula to get your results. But the difficulty for us is going to be to combine all of these steps in a single formula. So how are we going to do that exactly? So the hardest part here is going to be this one, to come up with a way to have this text join function together with this true and false statement in one formula. How do we get something like this to work? So let's start with this text join. So we basically need this text join function in one formula without having to copy this down to get these results. And to do that, we can use BYROW function. And BYROW is a lambda array function. Again, I have videos covering these in further detail. I highly recommend watching those to really understand what's going on here, because these are pretty complicated. But essentially, to replicate what I just had, what I'm going to do, I'm going to go ahead and select this data like this, comma, and then I'm going to pass what's called a lambda function. And this lambda function is going to accept each line from this range as an argument. So we'll just call that R, short for row, comma, and then after R, we're going to do formula expression. That's going to be what formula we want to apply to each line from this table. And the formula we're going to do is that same text join formula. And that text join, if you remember, has empty delimiter, comma, ignore, we set false. If you do true, it doesn't really matter on this one. And then finally, the text, instead of selecting this line, I'm just going to use that R, which is that argument, close parentheses, and then I'm going to close parentheses again for that lambda function, and then close parentheses again for that BYROW function. Now, this R is a variable. You can call it anything you want. You just have to match to be the same in both cases. Now, at this point, if I press enter, notice that that formula, with one formula, I got this, basically, that combined result in this one cell. Now, at this point, I want to check if that equals blank or not. That's the next step I'm going to do, and we'll do that in a second. For now, let's just remember that this formula will produce this. So now let's put this inside of that filter function. So I'm going to take this, cut that, and we'll do a filter function. And for filter function, I'm going to use this range right here, comma, and then we need what's called the condition. Condition would be an array of trues and falses. And the way we're going to get that array of trues and falses, we're just going to paste that BYROW function, which basically gives us this column, and we're going to check if that's not equal blank, which is double quotes, close parentheses, hit enter, and you'll see that this one formula, it kind of goes to the next line. Let me zoom out maybe a little bit here so that this sits on a single line. You can see this one formula will now take this range, add this extra column, and check whether that's empty or not, and give us only whatever's not empty. Which means at this point, we can get rid of all of this, and this should still work by itself. Now at this point, we just have to combine this with this. Now, before I do the combination, I want you to pay attention to this. If I go back to this formula, you'll see that within this formula, I use the same range twice. So I did that range once here for the filter function, and then I use that same range all over again for this BYROW function. So I want to avoid using the same range twice in a formula. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to use let function to do this. So what I can do let, and then with let function, actually, let me do this separately. Let me hit escape. I'm going to go back. Let me just cut this, and I'll paste this later. So I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to use let function here. So with let function, we start by providing a name for a variable. So I'm just going to call that variable data, comma. And then we need some sort of expression that will basically be stored within that variable data. And for me, that expression is just going to be this range, which was that repeating part, if you remember, in my formula. So I'm going to do a comma. And at this point now, after this comma, we can refer to this range as data, because we just stored it in this variable. So I'm just going to go ahead and paste the formula I had right after this comma. So I'm going to paste this. And at this point, I'm just going to close parentheses because we need one to close this let function. And what I can do, I can just replace all these occurrences with that variable name data. And by doing this, it will still work, but we only have to refer to this range just once. And the reason this could be helpful is because if I have to put something like this to get the range, which is this VSTACK, so I'm going to go here and combine this, copy this, hit escape, go back here. Now I just have to paste it in a single spot right here. So if I just replace that range and paste that VSTACK, which is the part that combines those two ranges, if I hit enter, I'll get all of these combined. And at this point, I don't really need any of this. I just have one formula that gets me all of these. So I'm going to cut this for a second, hit enter, and paste it over here. So you'll see we got now one formula that combines these two ranges, removes any blank lines from those ranges. And then, of course, if you keep adding new data, it will actually expand and add those new lines to this. Now, first of all, let me just copy paste the same exact formula in Excel just to confirm that this works in both. So I'm going to copy this formula, go to my Excel spreadsheet, and this is the same spreadsheet, as you can see. I'll just basically just paste it, hit enter. And as you can see, we got our results. And again, we have that problem with this type of formatting. So short date, that's what we want to do. And you can see this works just fine. Again, we're able to take those two tables and combine them and get combined range out of it. And at this point, we can now, I'm going to go back to Google Sheets in this one. So that's now our new formula. So I could now reuse this formula for many situations. So for example, let's look at this example. I have this data part 1, where I have this table with this columns, and I have this data part 3, which has the same columns in the same order in this tab. So if I wanted to combine those two things together and create like a combined sheet, I can create another tab, call it combined. And what I'll do, I'll just go back here, grab this formula as is, copy this, and just go back to this combined, and I'll paste it here. And then, of course, this is not going to point to the right thing right now because this is pointing to the wrong range. We need to update this range to point to the range in data 1 and this range to point to our range in data part 3, right? And you can see it's just as simple as replacing the range. I'll just keep this simple. I'll just hit equal sign, go to data part 1. I'll select this and as many lines as you want to go to. That's completely up to you at this point. I hit enter. So the only reason I was doing this is to just get this syntax. So at this point, now we can use this as one of those ranges. So I'm going to cut this, get out this here, go back here and replace this first range with this range, which is the part from the first tab. And then, of course, I need another one. Now we get a reference error because we still have inaccurate range here, but we're going to fix that very soon. So I'm going to hit equals, go to part 3, select this. However far you want to go, that's up to you. And then, of course, we have to copy this, get rid of that, go back to our formula, and finally replace this with that range. Of course, you can just do that range right away. I was just trying to kind of do more friendly way for basic users to understand what I'm doing here. But basically at this point, we can just keep comma separating as many of these as we like. So if I just go here and add a comma and keep adding ranges from different tabs, it will just combine those together. And of course, it will remove the blanks and just show us the data. So at this point, I can just copy the headers, go to this combined and paste. And there it is. We got our combined results. And then, of course, if I go to one of those and add a line or two, I should be able to see that this line is automatically included here. There it is, as the last line from that table. And of course, if we add some data to that other table too, it will automatically include that here too. And basically now we have just this one formula where you can just comma separate as many ranges as you want. And that should just give you your combined data. And of course, that same formula, it's going to work in Excel too. So if I copy this, go to my Excel spreadsheets and add a new tab called Combined, and simply just paste that here. I'm going to take this column and make it date. And there is that combined thing. Again, it's the same spreadsheet, same idea. You can, of course, copy paste your headers and get your results right here. Finally, I want to quickly go over cases when your columns don't exactly match. Now, for example, I have this data part 2, and in this one, these columns are not in the same order, and it's not the same number of columns. So if I just highlight the range, it wouldn't work. So basically what you would have to do, you would have to build again that range using your VSTACK and HSTACK. So if you look at this combined formula I just did right here, this is just VSTACK, and we're VSTACking all these different ranges. Now, assuming you have the same structure for each one of those tables, then this is fine. You can do this. But if you don't, then you probably need to select different columns from different tables to get this done. So let's say I want to grab date and then state and then sales. And then I have all of those 3 columns, date, state, sales here, and the same here, date, state, and sales. So if that's what I want, what I'm going to do, I'm going to basically go here and I'm going to do this separately, and then I'm going to put it back in that formula. So I'm going to use HSTACK. And for HSTACK, I'm just going to go to the first table, and I'm going to select those columns in the order I want. So I have date, comma, then I said state, comma, and then I said sales. And of course, if you have more columns, you just select those columns. Just make sure you match your range sizes. And if I close parentheses, hit enter, that should give me those 3 columns from my first table. Now I'm going to take that, cut it, and I'll go to my formula and I'll replace the first range I just did here with that HSTACK formula. And we're going to, of course, replace the second and third one too. So I'm going to hit enter, and that gives us this. Now to make this simple, I'm going to go back here. Let's just for now remove the second range here. And we'll just keep that first HSTACK here by itself within that VSTACK. So if I hit enter, so that this is easy to understand, we have our 3 columns in this order. We got date, we got state, and we got sales. And we can get rid of all of this. So now I'm going to do basically another HSTACK for another table. So I'll just go here and do HSTACK. And I'll do part 2 now. I'll go here, select this, comma this, comma this, close parentheses, hit enter, and that's our second HSTACK. So now I can grab that formula without equal sign, copy that, get rid of this, go back to this formula, and right after this first HSTACK, still within VSTACK, I'm going to do a comma and paste that second HSTACK. And if I enter, that should now combine those 2. And then we can, of course, just keep doing this. So I'm going to do this one more time, HSTACK. I'm going to go to part 3, select this, comma this, comma this, close parentheses, hit enter. There it is. Copy that formula. Get rid of this. Go back to my first formula, and after I did my second H stack, which ends right here, I'm gonna do a comma and paste another one. And basically the idea here is that you can just keep doing this as many times as you need, and this would work just fine. Now, this gets a little hard to read at this point, so something we can do to make this a little easier is to just push some of these things to a new line. So if I do Alt or Option Enter to push this H stack, and then Alt and Option Enter, and then Alt and Option Enter, not and, but or, I guess. So basically Alt Enter on a Windows, Option Enter on a Mac. So there you go. Now this way it's a little easier to read. You can see this is the first H stack, second H stack, third H stack, and you can just keep doing commas and doing another H stack after this. And that should give you your combined results. Once again, let's just test the same exact formula now in Excel too, so that you can see it works exactly the same way. So I'm gonna go to my Excel spreadsheet, and here I'll get rid of this formula and I'll just paste this formula instead. And that should give me, as you can see, my results. We just have to put the right column names in the right spot. And there it is. We got our combined results. And with this setup, as we add more information to part 1, part 2, or part 3, it should automatically be included in our combined results. So let's just do a quick example here. Let's say I want to add another data point for our last table here. So last table here would be part 3. So here, if I go and copy one of these lines, paste here, change the date, change the numbers. If I go back, I should be able to see that this sales amount, this date, and this date now shows here as our last data point. And that's how we combine multiple tables, sheets, etc. And this should give you the flexibility to combine your sheets, ranges, whatever you want to call them, in multiple sheets and get one combined result in any way you like. And that should do it for this video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe, and I'll see you next time.